Hi, everybody. We'll get started in just a minute. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Brett Weissel, and I am the Global Policy and Advocacy Lead with the Early Childhood Development Action Network. So thank you all for joining. A few logistics before we begin our webinar today. Please first introduce yourself via the chat. We'd love to see where you're from, what organization you work for. We have interpretation in English, French, and Spanish. So please select the language on Zoom. I think you all know how to do that. And you'll be able to have translation for those languages. And then if you do have questions for the panelists, please enter them in the Q&A. You can also use the chat. We'll be monitoring it. We'll try to respond as best we can. We have carved out some time for Q&A. So welcome everybody to the webinar, Scaling Innovative Approaches to Early Childhood Education, System Strengthening Partnerships and Parental and Community Engagement. This is actually the second webinar in our series on scaling early childhood education with GPE, KIX, IDRC, LEGO, and partner countries. And so today we'll be hearing from some really amazing speakers working at the global level, the country level, and local levels to share. They're going to share their work. They're going to share their experiences around scaling ECE, sector planning, community engagement, and much more. So we have a really full agenda. I'm going to wrap up right now. Just want to thank you all for joining us. Thank our speakers, and really just remind us why we're here today, to share and learn from each other, from across countries, from across regions. Learning from others and leveraging what works is more important than ever, given the budget and fiscal constraints the sector is facing these days. And so we'll continue to use our platform so that you can learn from each other and learn from other countries and experiences. So with that, I am happy to begin the webinar by introducing Ian McPherson, who is the KIX lead at the Global Partnership for Education, to set the stage. Over to you, Ian.
Great. Thank you so much, Brett, and greetings, everybody. My name is Ian McPherson, and as Brett mentioned, I lead the Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, or KIX, at the Global Partnership for Education, and I'm based in Washington, DC. So a warm welcome to everybody on behalf of GPE KIX, the International Development Research Center, and the LEGO Foundation. As Brett mentioned, this is the second of a two-part webinar set run in partnership with ECDAN that builds off a report which synthesized emerging evidence from 8 GPE KIX projects that sought to strengthen early childhood education, ECE, with a focus on scaling the impacts of ECE innovation. There were 5 thematic areas that surfaced through the synthetic analyses: play-based pedagogy and school readiness, teacher training and professional development, gender equality, equity, and inclusion, scaling and sustainability of ECE in education sector planning, and ECE partnerships, community, and parental participation. The first webinar, which took place on the 6th of March, presented an overview of the general findings and recommendations from the research report and dove into key findings from 2 of these 5 thematic focus areas, more specifically from applied research in Uganda on play-based pedagogy and school readiness, and teacher training and professional development in the Gambia. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the presenters from the first KIX ECE webinar, including the Africa Early Childhood Development Network, AFSEN, who wrote the report and presented headline findings, the KIX project grantees from local institutions in Uganda and the Gambia, and government officials who discussed how the research informed policy dialogue, as well as the 600 plus online participants for the rich exchange and discussion that we had. Today's webinar presents an opportunity to continue to explore the rich body of evidence produced through this cohort of KIX-supported ECE research, with a thematic focus on 2 of those 5 themes, namely scaling and sustainability of ECE in education sector planning and ECE partnerships, community and parental participation. And we really look forward to hearing directly from partners and stakeholders working in Sierra Leone, in South Sudan, and Zambia. And so we hope that the research supported by KIX contributes to and builds on the growing evidence base aimed at supporting collective efforts of policymakers and practitioners working in the field of ECE. We thank you for your active participation in today's webinar, and once again, encourage participants to leverage the wealth of information included in the KIX synthesis report in your respective efforts to help ensure that all young children enjoy their right to nurturing care and early learning. And so with that, Brett, I will pass back to you. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ian. And you'll see that report in the chat there. And from time to time, we will be posting different resources and reports in the chat, so be on the look for that. So next, I'd like to introduce Margarita Lopez. She's the Senior Program Officer at the International Development Research Center, or IDRC. And Margarita will moderate the first panel on scaling and sustainability of ECE in education sector planning. Over to you, Margarita.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you very much. Happy to be today with you all. As Ian mentioned, this panel will focus on some of the ideas included in the KIX synthesis report on early learning. We will focus specifically on scaling and sustainability in this first panel. So as you know, GPE KIX projects implemented between 2019 and 2024. The synthesis is summarized, these GPE projects on early learning. And these projects have successfully scaled different national, community-based, and home-based early childhood education models. So we learned from this project that scalability and sustainability of early learning programs depend on various factors, mainly political support from the outset. Teacher capacity building is very important. Community and civil society engagement is fundamental. And also the integration of these models and innovations into national education sector plans, including here integrating early childhood education costs and budgeting for their implementation. So, however, in some GPE partner countries are still lacking early childhood education policy. And the pre-primary sector is still not fully included into the education sector planning. And this is where the GPE KIX project, integrating early childhood education in sectoral planning, led by UNICEF, comes into play, providing relevant tools and evidence to country to support the integration of early education in education sector planning. Through this first session, we will hear from UNICEF and from the Ministries of Education in South Sudan and Sierra Leone. The 3 presentations will be followed by a QA session where you will be able to ask questions in the chat. With that, so now let me introduce our first speaker. This is Divya Latta. Divya leads the Global Early Childhood Education Program at UNICEF. She has advanced child-focused policies and programs in diverse contexts in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern and Southern Europe. She has also served on the boards of several organizations and networks focusing on early childhood. Welcome, Divya. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Margarita, for that kind introduction. And greetings, colleagues from everywhere. Really delighted to be part of this forum today. If you're here today, then clearly you don't need to be convinced why early childhood education is important. So I'm going to skip that and move straight to the real question before us. How is it that we can make this important transformative approach a reality in the lives of all children, and especially those who are the most vulnerable? So today I will be discussing with you some of our journey in this integration of ECE in sectoral planning, the scaling research that has been supported by the Global Partnership for Education, Knowledge and Innovation Exchange, the GPE KIX project. Next slide, please. So our KIX project actually was predated by a partnership between UNICEF and the Global Partnership for Education to develop what we call the Better Early Learning and Development at Scale approach, popularly known as the BELS. And this was an approach to identify how we can engage systematically and through evidence-based prioritization, how we can engage key stakeholders in a country to strengthen the early childhood education system and really work towards scaling this very important agenda. Next slide, please. So as we were looking at developing BELS, it was quite clear that there was a strong momentum to prioritize early childhood education as part of the basic education systems. However, there were several questions that countries were grappling, especially as they looked at how progressively they could be moving towards universal access. There were questions, for example, for a lot of countries, if we can't afford right away universal access for 3 years of pre-primary, should we be focusing on just a few? Or should we, in fact, make at least that 1 year universal for all children? And similar questions which would then determine how they want to strengthen their ECE system. These questions cannot be addressed in a room in isolation, but really need that stakeholder engagement. And that is how we came upon the BELS approach, which was then further researched through the scaling research under the GPE KIX. And of course, from UNICEF's own analysis, we could see that there are almost 50 countries globally that already have the systems that are at the tipping point of this scaling. They probably need a little bit more something to be able to prioritize what they will do next so that they can make that leap and in fact make sure that we are on the track to universalizing pre-primary education. Next slide, please. So very, very briefly, I know the clock is ticking, so I'll be very brief in describing to you our approach. We were working on this project, UNICEF, the World Bank, and ECDAN as core partners with 5 countries. There was Lesotho and Kyrgyzstan, which were already part of the earlier BELS approach that when we were developing it. But we also added new countries like Tajikistan, South Sudan, and Sierra Leone, who were newer countries and in fact participated in further developing the approach, but also utilizing it, and we will see the results shortly. As part of this process, we used both a qualitative and quantitative data collection, and I will just explain to you a little bit from the tools we used, but several internal platforms of communities of practice within countries were extremely helpful that we used for this kind of consultation and participatory prioritization that countries undertook. There was also a huge momentum across our collaborators, and more than 40 different agencies contributed towards the development of what now is an online toolkit, in fact, the ECE Accelerator Toolkit, which in fact is available online free of cost and can be used by other countries. On the toolkit itself, it basically mirrors the education sector planning cycle and focuses on the key aspects of that for early childhood education. Let me now take you through a few very quickly the results that we have. I think we missed a slide. If you can just go back very quickly to the bill to last. Yes, please. So just to give you bill to last, please. Yes. So just to give you a very quick snapshot, so this is the process we followed. In this diagram, you see there are 5 key action drivers which constitute an ECE system. And outside of it, there is the enabling environment of the policy scenario as well as the demand side. And through the pre-primary subsector analysis tool, which piggybacks on this bill to last framework, we are able to work with country stakeholders to really assess the strengths, weaknesses, and come up on a prioritized plan, which can be then costed and included in the ESP. Of course, we have also developed GESI tools focusing on gender, disability, and emergencies. Next one, please. And we can skip straight to the results now in the interest of time. So just to highlight a few gains that were made as a result of this initiative, I said already that Lesotho and Kyrgyzstan were already part of our program when we were developing the bells. And through this project, the second phase, they not only intensified that, but in fact were able to mobilize resources to bring some of their prioritized plans to fruition. For example, in Lesotho, they were able to mobilize $5 million through the matching grant modality in GPE with the Roger Federer Foundation, and they've in fact been able to really strengthen the training of their teachers. Kyrgyzstan did a fantastic engagement with the midterm assessment of the government's own initiative, and in fact refined the ECE indicators, which were then adopted in the MS, and we all know how important that aspect is. Tajikistan, one of the newer ones on the block, went through several iterations of, first of all, linking the local and central planning in terms of prioritization and also how some of these prioritized plans will be implemented, but also took a deep dive on the GESI agenda and in fact now are poised to make a significant focus on disability inclusion through a national analysis, which will then further lead to establishing those comprehensive disability inclusive ECE systems in the country. Next slide, please. Sierra Leone and South Sudan, you will hear, so I'm going to hold off on saying a lot, but just to say that, again, this is a really solid success story. In fact, in Sierra Leone, we started with the early childhood planning at least a year before the ESP was due. And so in that sense, and in fact, what we were also able to do is to draw upon our the earlier BELS country, especially I remember Ghana was a country that initially guided Sierra Leone from their experience, having done this themselves during the BELS phase, and then enabled them to undertake a similar analysis well before the education sector plan was due. And it was, I remember, in 2020, 2021 that we worked on it. And long story short, they were able to mobilize resources from the GPE, the Lego Foundation, to really complement the early childhood component of their post-COVID learning recovery, and are really on a road to having a solid ECE program. Of course, I will let our colleagues from the ministries say more about it. South Sudan is a situation of protracted crisis, as we all know, and this was a particularly challenging learning for us, that how do these ESP processes, which typically work in development context, not necessarily in a humanitarian way, and here is a country which is almost starting from scratch in almost every aspect of the education sector. So here we were working with the country, South Sudan, and drew upon, again, some of the older countries who had gone through this process. I will, of course, wait for our colleagues to tell you more about this, but we do have now, after almost 16 years of working on it, an early childhood education policy, and we're all not only very proud of it, but really fully on board to make that a reality for all children. Just a couple of other, while we worked with these 5 countries most intensively, we also worked on taking some of these approaches. And there, I think UNICEF's structure of being able to work across 7 regions enabled us to get the leverage that we, in fact, in more than 70 countries, we were able to promote this approach of BELS, work with countries to see where they are and how we can move forward in making that the change in their ECE planning possible. Next slide, please. A few quick ones on the key lessons learned, and I think I'll just pick 2 to speak to right now. Of course, the validation of the approach we had taken, that putting ECE as a national priority in the sector plan is definitely a good way to move forward. And I think something that worked very well for us was that to meet countries where they are. We did not come with a notion of that, these are all the things that have to be prioritized, but actually provided some of the evidence-based analytic tools and forums that could engage stakeholders within the country under the leadership of the government, which is very, very important, and manage to engage them in a process through which they identified the strengths, the weaknesses, and what they could do next. And then from sometimes a laundry list, able to then pick out what are the next 5 or 6 things we can put in the next plan, what would it cost, and then go through a little bit of iteration of what are the different options, what gives us the most bang for the buck. And that's where our cost and financing tool has been really, really effective. And for example, now in Malawi, they have actually agreed to have one pre-primary classroom in each and every primary school. And that's their way of identifying how they want to move forward. Next slide, please. Finally, I think just a few recommendations. We, of course, would like to, in moving forward, we would like to continue to track the implementation and monitoring of this ECE in sector planning. There is still a lot to be learned and done. And so we really encourage any partners here who are interested in engaging with us on this issue. And we really find this a very strong approach and would like to grow it further. The importance of data systems is cannot be overemphasized, and I think it is also very important to see how we can meaningfully have that kind of data, which is population-based and gives us a sense of the really where countries are. UNICEF itself is working in the next iteration of the BELS approach. It's called the BILS approach. We have added the I for inclusion, because now we are focusing on the GESI, which we already did on the gender very strongly, and the emergencies in the first two iterations. We are now looking at disability inclusion. So our BILS approach now is really focusing on that, and we are trying to see how data systems and other aspects of provision can really address disability inclusion in ECE. Finally, of course, we would really like to see how some of this can be both disseminated through South-South exchange, and we can also work with the country colleagues to take this approach forward, learn in the process, and also use some of the very strong KIX hubs and other platforms that can really be instrumental in not only disseminating what we are doing in early childhood space, but making that very important connection, how this intervention and this approach in fact strengthens the education system as a whole. And I think that is a dialogue which is continuing through our current engagement in the G20, where South Africa holds the presidency. And we are working very closely with our partners to make sure that all of those connections across the life course can be well understood, adopted, and really make that difference to every child's life, so that we're able to see good returns in terms of the education outcomes we seek to achieve. I think that's about the last slide. If you could go to the next one. Yes, we are. And thank you very much. Looking forward to engaging with you further on this.
Thank you very much, Divya, for your clear presentation. And this is a fantastic project, and we know how difficult it is to summarize everything in these 7-10 minutes. So the project has provided useful learnings and tools for the community of researchers and practitioners. And we can see that now the project is going beyond the 5 countries you mentioned. So solid and successful stories, as you said. Thank you very much. Let me introduce now Mr. Serafino Tisa Salvatore. Is Serafino here? Just let me recheck here. Okay. I don't see Serafino. Is he here?
Yes, hello.
Okay, okay.
Yes. In fact, Serafino is not around, so I'm here representing him. Yeah, he's committed. Okay. Yes, he's
perfect.
committed.
So this is mailing. So mailing will present about the case in South Sudan. So that will be the possibility now to hear directly from the country, the Ministry of Education and the UNICEF team also in South Sudan, how this project was put in place in South Sudan. We'll hear about success stories, challenges, etc. So I open the floor also to mailing in this moment, like to start with this presentation about the project, the KIX GPE project in South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With me here is Viola Romano. She's sitting in for Serafino Tisa. She's an active member of the ECE Technical Working Group at the Ministry of Education. So I'll give her a chance to present for South Sudan, then I will support her if there is any follow-up questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. hello. In fact, we really much give the appreciation to the GPE KIX research project for they have done a lot for the ECE in South Sudan. First, I will just want to say, without the KIX project in South Sudan, the policy will have not been developed, because we have been looking for resources. We lobbied for over 16 years actually to develop the policy for ECE, but we could not make it until when the KIX projects have come in to support us. With the KIX project, a lot have been done. We have managed to establish the ECE technical working group, and we had so many workshops, meetings, consultation meetings, and finally we managed to have a national ECE policy strategy, and also we had managed to have the ECE policy and implementation plan, and also we have the ECE advocacy framework, which was also developed through the project. In fact, it was all about the sector, the education sector plan. Also, we managed to have the ECE accelerator toolkit in consultation meetings with the stakeholders, and the subsector analysis workshop, and the policy development. Also, we had some experiences and exchange visit also with the team from UNICEF Sierra Leone. We have learned a lot from their experiences on the ECE subsector plan development. The pre-primary subsector analysis workshop also really have informed in the policy development. Now the results from the project. The result from the project, as Ministry of Education, we have committed and we prioritize the ECE in 2023 to 2027 General Education Strategic Plan. About that also, we have the education, general education sector plans also have managed to construct approximately 510 pre-primary, semi-permanent classrooms within the existing primary schools across the country. In addition to 116 new primary schools was also planned for construction in the general education sector plan, which is going also to incorporate 2 primary schools, pre-primary classrooms in each school. In 2023, the National Early Childhood Education Policy strategy and implementation plan for primary education were completed, and the ECE advocacy framework was developed. In addition to that, in 2024 also the ECE learning activity guide and the teacher training manual was developed. This is part of the results. And to continue with that, the ECE strategy is really aligned with the General Education Strategic Plan 2023-2027, which is really focusing on the continuous learning during conflict and emergency. The technical working group, which was formed, was set up at the national level. And the formation of this technical working group is going also to be part across South Sudan at all levels as part of the ECE networking. The ECE technical working group also, they are the one leading the pilot of the ECE intervention in schools nationwide due to the new policy. So really the technical working group for ECD is doing a lot in implementation of the ECE as what the project have intended. Lesson learned. Lesson learned is the ECE accelerated toolkit have really helped to provide into the integration of ECE into the national policies. And in collaboration also with the partners, like the UNICEF, of course, is the leading, the Save the Children, and all the partners who are really playing a great role in pushing and supporting early childhood in South Sudan. We cannot forget that. They have really a vital role in that. Now, the recommendations. The recommendation and the next step is that we are planning also for the ECE Accelerated Toolkit will be used for coordinating, implementing, and monitoring early childhood education plans in South Sudan. And then the technical working group will not just be at national level, because it has also to go, as what I have mentioned before, we have to go up to state level and then at county level, or it should not just be functioning at national level. And also there are plans to create community-based ECE schools and train teachers to develop free teaching materials. I think with that, I can say, yeah, thank you so much. This is what have come out as a result of the KIX project in South Sudan, and we are really grateful for what they have done. Without them, early childhood in Sudan will have not managed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Viola, for sharing these key points from the Ministry of Education involvement through the project. This is really a concrete example on how it works. And so we can see also how the use and the scaling of findings, the policy uptake at the national level. So this is important things, important points for us at KIX GPE, and we are really happy to hear from this experience. Thank you again. Now I welcome Ms. Melody Martin, who is Deputy Director of Pre-Primary Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education in Sierra Leone. Melody will present on the project in Sierra Leone. She will have the same time, and we are really happy to welcome you, Melody. So are you here? I don't see you on the screen.
I'm here. I'm using massive space.
Perfect. Yes.
Good day, everyone. I'm using masses. I'm Melody for Sierra Leone. I support the technical and operational programming for ECE in the ministry. I'm the Deputy Director of Early Childhood Development in the Ministry of Education. Well, for Sierra Leone, the Ministry of Education was interested in collaborating with UNICEF and GPE for the BELS conceptual framework, because there were no ECE policies or strategies or guidelines. Initially, we didn't have an ECE subsector because it was subsumed under primary education. It was subsumed under primary education, which means that access to ECE was low, limited or dedicated funding was not available. Yes, the government wanted to make ECE a priority, but they needed evidence. So for us to generate that evidence, we made use of the ECE Accelerated Toolkits. We use these toolkits to develop the ECE, or the pre-primary objectives and priorities and activities for the current education sector plan from 2022 to 2026. The journey started with the technical working group, which was formed in 2020. This group composed of both national and sub-national level stakeholders like CSOs, other line ministries, etc. This group was and is dedicating to mainstreaming ECE in Sierra Leone through the ASP process and even now. We adapted the tools from the ECE Accelerated Toolkits. We undertook the ECE subsector analysis using the pre-primary subsector analysis tool. The tool was used to define ECE in our local context. The group further assessed the strengths and weaknesses of all the aspects of Sierra Leone's pre-primary subsector. After implementing the tool, these were our results. 1, tools from the ECE Accelerated Toolkit helped the ECE Technical Working Group in identifying root causes and appreciating how the 5 core functions of planning and budgeting, curriculum development, workforce development, family and community engagement, and quality assurance needed to develop to achieve equitable access to quality ECE services for children in Sierra Leone. For example, we had very low gross enrollment rates before the implementation of the tool. It was 19%. The work of the ECE Technical Working Group resulted in the development of the ECE objectives and priorities for the National Education Sector Plan. Number 3, the integration of the ECE in the current education sector plan contributed to government identifying the delivery of the foundations of learning for all as the priority reform that will be achieved through education system transformation in the country. Pre-primary is also key to our current GPE system transformation and system capacity grants, mainly due to integrating ECE into the ESP for the first time. As I mentioned it earlier, there were no ECE strategies or policies. It was only the primary sector. But with the support or with the implementation of the ECE accelerated tool, we are able for the first time in the history of Sierra Leone to have the ECE or the pre-primary as a subsector, a standalone. Lessons learned from using the toolkit and recommendations. One of the lessons learned was that we had a knowledge exchange with Ghana. A team from Freetown visited Accra in Ghana, our counterparts in Ghana had already used the toolkit, and this inspired our ECE TWG in Sierra Leone to embrace the tools and explore using the toolkit, which helped to shape the ECE objectives, priorities, and activities of the education sector plan. We also established a smaller writing team comprising of 6 members. The larger ECE TWG comprises of 20 members, which developed the ECE chapter of the ESP, which made the development of the ESP chapter easier as ideas were more focused because these writers were part of the larger ECE group. The ECE Technical Working Group is made up of people who have been working in ECE, like we said, private and public practitioners, government functionaries, and the civil society organizations. They were able to relate to the items in the toolkit. Number 3, there was also a strong enthusiasm by the ECE Technical Working Group to learn about the tools and use them in the process of the ESP development. Next steps. The Ministry of Education in Sierra Leone intends to further utilize the accelerator toolkits to conduct a mid-term review of progress made with implementation of pre-primary objectives, priorities, and activities in the education sector plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melody. This is always a pleasure to hear from people that were directly involved in projects in the implementation at the country level. And I like your last part, next steps. Yes, this is things, research and learning, etc., that will continue. Let me just maybe try to summarize a little what we have heard from the previous presentation from our speakers today. So just to highlight some of the main points maybe, and probably I will miss some of them, but just to say it was it was been like so great to hear from different perspectives. The general perspective, of course, presented by Divya, and the very concrete examples that came from the two countries. So from South Sudan and from Sierra Leone. So from Viola and from Melody. Thank you for that. We heard that it's not possible, that it is not only possible, but it is essential. It is essential to integrate early childhood education in education sectoral planning. Yes, that's certainly a very important message. This is a subsector that needs to be developed and supported to deliver and coordinate quality pre-primary education at scale, which is essential when countries are looking to improve quality and equity in education and all education system, because this is a subsystem is connected with the other parts of the education sector. The panelists also pointed out different aspects coming from research on how to scale the innovation or the model here. For example, we have heard about the need to develop teacher training, curricula, parenting manuals, and also the fundamental point to contextualize knowledge for building the capacity of stakeholders. Divya mentioned the contextualization as a main point. And it's not a surprise that the question on the budgetary allocation has been mentioned also. Understanding of costs and as well as cost simulation analysis are a key part of the scaling journey, the scaling in general for these projects and initiatives on early child education. We heard about the Sierra Leone experience working this new education sector plan, and also the same for South Sudan. So the integration with the general planning is really something that we are seeing here. And this is, I would say, very satisfactory in terms of scaling and sustainability. What were like main points at the beginning of the project when we started this project at GPE KIX, and of course to see that in the end we had some very specific learnings and recommendations on that. And maybe just adding us to sustainability, there are also also points that come from this research, from these projects. One is, for example, the use of monitoring and evaluation systems that is part of the accelerator toolkit now. And probably also that was something that Divya mentioned. This was the enhancement of the data systems to include early childhood education indicators, because this is another way finally to ensure that decision makers can use that information and that will be used to take decisions. So that's so important also. And I would say also the importance of partnerships that was mentioned, and that's so key to think in the sustainability of these initiatives. So time is advancing, and now I think it's time to switch to the QA session. So we have received some questions in the chat. Thank you for that. So my colleagues and me, we are trying to figure out how to select and deal with that, because the time is not too long. So let me start with one question that is very general, but can really help to go back to the discussion. So one is how to scale up early childhood education in countries that have not prioritized indicators and targets in this sector. So I think that maybe Divya can start with this question. And of course, if the other panelists would like to add something, they are welcome. Maybe Divya?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much, Margarita. So first of all, if we are looking at the first thing is that there needs to be some kind of support for early childhood subsector. Now, whether it is coming from certain researchers which have identified gaps in learning at later levels, which have been then connected back with the gaps in early childhood provision, or whatever the reasons. If there is nothing in that country context that exists, then I think drawing upon some of the more globally available researches can be looked at. But the main thing is one has to first find out who are the stakeholders who are somewhat behind the agenda of really promoting early childhood education. Getting them together, there is guidance in the accelerator toolkit of even how to put together a technical working group that can be, and that was used very well by both South Sudan and Sierra Leone. And then one goes into looking at what I mentioned, the diagram I showed of the build to last, which is a framework which identifies key components of the pre-primary subsector. Now, one of the strongest stakeholders in this whole process are parents and communities. And for sure, if one has consultations with them, they will come up with how they see their children spending the time, whether they understand whether that learning is happening or not happening. They will even be able to connect with some of the issues of later learning gaps. And so they will be definitely one strong stakeholder. And within the education section, if one can find out more stakeholders, NGOs who are implementing such programs, etc., who can then bring to bear their own experience. So that's the first step, I would say, if you are starting absolutely from scratch. And then looking at the subsector analysis tool to see maybe not all the 5 action drivers, not all of the enabling environment can be handled at one spot. Like I said, we meet the countries where they are. So you could prioritize what is it that you want to work on first. You want to first talk about the workforce, or you want to talk about the curriculum, and start where you are, and then from that weave towards the other aspects of the analysis. A lot more resources are available. I won't go into that right now, but those may be some of the initial stages to start with, to get your stakeholder group together who will deliberate on it and actually sustain that momentum. And in fact, if there is no political will, then to first leverage that as well. And then be working through the more technical aspects in an evidence way to identify the strengths, weaknesses, and come to the priorities of what we should do next. Let me stop there. I'm sure other colleagues can add as well.
Any additional insight from the other colleagues, Viola or Melody? Or I can jump to the next question, and maybe this is more for Melody, that you mentioned, Melody, this exchange between Sierra Leone and Ghana. So that sounds really, really interesting. How did the South-South exchange happen in that case? If you can tell us a little about that, and what did you gain, in general, of course, for each country? If you can talk a little more about that, will be great.
Thank you.
Melody, yes. Please go ahead.
For the Ghana exchange, initially we had online discussions virtually with the ECE technical working group. They were able to share with us insights on how the tool, the ECE Accelerated Toolkit, has helped them and what they achieved in using the toolkit. So the team in Sierra Leone was inspired by what we had from them, and so we implemented the ECE Accelerated Toolkit here. It's helped to shape the ECE objectives, the priorities, and the activities.
Thank you, Melody. So that's super important, because we can hear the power of a change. It's really something that is powerful, and we invite our projects, and we invite countries to share, to visit each other, to learn from each other. It's so important having this peer work, peer discussions, etc. Thank you, Melody.
Yeah, based on the exchange, we were able to form the technical working group. Based on the exchange with Ghana, we were able to form the ECE technical working group.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me go for a third question here that we received from Abdullah Omar Mohammed. And this is, I will read it. So in Somalia and in many fragile contexts, early childhood education is often overlooked due to limited infrastructure and resources. Yet we know that engaging parents and communities is key to making early childhood education more inclusive and sustainable. From your experiences and the GPE KIX project, what practical strategies or models have proven effective in building strong partnerships at the community level, especially where formal systems are still developing? How can we ensure these approaches are truly scalable and responsive to local realities? Just let me say that that's something of this will be part of the next panel that will be focusing on community involvement, etc. But in any case, we would like to hear from you. What do you think about this question? So maybe Viola, if you have something to share about it, how to work in fragile countries.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I think in my presentation, I think this is one of the next steps which we have here in South Sudan as a priority, because involvement of community is really vital in the ECE plans. So we have plans to create community-based ECE schools. And then we will train the teachers also to develop free teaching materials. When we talk about teaching, free teaching learning materials, I think we are going to go more to use the local materials because it is of a low cost. Yeah, that is one of our plans. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other response to this question, comment from Divya or from Melody?
If I may come in very quickly, I'll be brief. So as I was saying earlier, I think parents, communities are one of the strongest partners we have in this early childhood space. And sometimes if there is no forum to convene them, one does find that parents with young children also show up at, let's say, pre-primary, at the primary level meetings. And, it's important to raise the issues around development of young children, to create the awareness of what learning at this stage means and what long-term consequences it has for the kind of successes we want to see in through the education process. Children should be engaged, they should be learning, and of course, attending regularly so that we get the outcomes. So some of the ways that we also do that is to, convene parenting groups around like play groups. So these may be very informal. They may not even meet every day, but more like once a month, once in 2 weeks, and something that provides some information, but also very directly some building the skills to then work with their children on these learning activities, which often tend to be quite fun. And once parents get hooked, we do find that they are able to engage fairly regularly. Of late, some of the tech approaches like apps for parents, and UNICEF has the Bebo app, which you can Google and find. This is an app that takes a child's from the 0 to 6 age range and has 6 different, the health, the nutrition, mental well-being, and of course the learning agendas are all addressed there. And what it does is, based on the age of the child, parents will get regular messages. They can even ask questions. And there are examples of games and activities they could take up. And then usually these work best when a structured program is engaging parents also, so that they can have some hands-on practice with those activities. And maybe my last suggestion would be to, where you do already have an engaged group, it is really great to see then how they want to exercise their agency. Do they want to, is that something that they can, also make an agenda as with the political leadership, with also the local provision authorities that are looking at whether early childhood education is available or not. And there's a huge role they play whenever these services are made available in actually managing them, making sure they're running well, and doing their bit to monitor, to support center management committees, which have a strong engagement of parents, not only help in running them well, in meeting some of the gaps, but also creating that cultural and linguistic linkages, which sometimes may be a little hard to do, especially if you see refugee contexts where Your basic service provider may not even have the language that the children use at home. So having parents who are engaged, who can make that bridge happen and can work with the practitioners, I think some of those approaches work really well. I'm looking forward to the next session where I'm sure we will learn a lot more on this. So let me stop there.
Yes, thank you very much, Divya. Yeah, we can continue the conversation for days, I'm sure, but now we need to stop this panel and to switch to the next one. Thank you very much for your participation, for the panelists, and also the audience with comments and questions. So now it's a pleasure to introduce Joa Case. Joa is the Early Learning Thematic Lead at the Global Partnership for Education. So he will moderate the second panel today. So with that, so welcome, Joa. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Margarita. First of all, just thanks to all our participants. I've just been looking in the chat from coming in from around the world and just so many great questions and reflections. So thank you for your engagement in today's session. It really makes it what it is, such a rich exchange, and looking forward to your reflections in this second panel. Which here we're going to discuss KIX ECC research that focuses on partnerships and community and parental participation. So really three interconnected and essential components of any healthy ECC subsector. And there's several KIX projects from this cohort that have showcased how essential partnerships are really to successfully implementing ECC programs. And there's different levels. And I think we've heard some examples in today's first panel, but we have regional partnerships and the development of different regional platforms through KIX were so important for supporting, knowledge exchange and having really detailed discussions about addressing shared challenges within the EC subsector across regions, across countries. There were country-to-country partnerships, right? And really facilitating greater South-South collaboration and peer exchange. There were country visits that took place through KIX to facilitate learning around program implementation. There were these technical consultations, and I think we heard from Melody this concrete example of how Ghana supported Sierra Leone in informing the BELDS diagnostic workshop that was so successful. Then there's a variety of different partnerships at country level between governments and civil society, which through KIX has really shown how essential it is to help operationalize national policies and programs. We've seen tangible example of these partnerships through the BELDS project, right? Through the development of these national technical working groups that were highlighted during the first panel that were so important to driving the EC agenda and really bringing together a diverse group of stakeholders to really advocate for EC at country level. And we saw examples as well through the BELDS project of public-private partnerships and engaging with the private sector to explore different opportunities to finance and to drive equitable approaches to early childhood education. And then maybe kind of segueing into where we're going to really delve into some more substantive discussions, local partnerships with parents and with communities, which were proved to be really essential in ensuring the successful integration and sustainability of EC programs, right? And notably around the implementation of play-based learning and school readiness projects, which is a key focus of this first research cohort, but also around the financial sustainability and viability of local EC programs. And so for us to better appreciate some of these key learnings and findings, we're fortunate enough to have two great panelists with us today. And so we'll hear from both panelists and then we'll have a Q&A, so similar structure to our first panel. And today's discussion, to make it a bit more tangible, we're going to hone in on one specific project, which is entitled Scaling the School Readiness Initiative, Strengthening School and Community Capacities for Adoption of Play-Based Learning in Uganda and Zambia. And we are going to focus on the Zambia country example. First, we will be hearing from Mr. Robinson Mambwe, the head of the Department of Primary Education in the School of Education at the University of Zambia, who is going to present the overall findings from this project. And then we're very fortunate to have Ms. Natasha Nyangwete, an EC teacher that participated in this project and who, as well as part of a capacity building initiative through KIX, is currently pursuing a master's degree at the University of Zambia in early childhood education, which is really exciting. So with that, let me hand over to our first panelist, Mr. Robinson. Please, the floor is yours to provide us with a brief overview of the key findings from this School Readiness Project initiative in Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Our colleagues, I know it's good morning, good afternoon, depending on our location. As introduced, I'm Robinson Mambwe from the University of Zambia, currently heading the Department of Primary Education. We were hosting this project from the School of Education. The project that you are seeing, colleagues, was implemented by 3 partners. We had Zambia Open Community Schools as our lead institution. Then we had the University of Zambia. We had also Makerere University in Uganda. The project was about scaling the school initiative, readiness initiative. This research, maybe we can keep on moving the slides. I'm not sure if the slides are moving, but if not, I can still proceed. So among the things, colleagues, as you can see, I've already talked about implementing partners, and also what you see is the aim. We aimed to actually enhance early childhood education. You see, we focus on play-based learning, school readiness, transition management. So the research took about 22 months, a bit of extension. Objectives, as usual, by KIX projects was to generate knowledge, strengthen capacity, and strengthen coordination structures. A lot of things were done in terms of objectives of the research, but for the sake of this webinar, I think our focus is basically on the parental involvement, and that is one of the issues that our research focused on, the involvement and support of parents and communities to the implementation of ECE. Okay, so we did, of course, a number of research activities, collecting both qualitative and quantitative data in the field visitations, also visited Uganda in the process to just establish what is on the ground as a way of trying to generate the data that can inform decision making. And from the field, as you can see on the slide, colleagues, one of the issues that emerged as a summary, what was stake in terms of our ECE when it came to parental support and the community involvement was the issue of the perceptions that parents and the communities themselves had on ECE. There was also an issue that emerged to do with support and involvement, which was informed or influenced by the perceptions that existed within the communities regarding early childhood education. We focused also as well just the state of the infrastructure, and also we delved into issues of pedagogy, play-based learning on the side, especially of the parents and even the teachers that were involved in managing these ECE centers when it came to teaching and learning. Out of all these, we realized that addressing these aspects had a consequence in terms of us achieving and realizing quality education in ECE centers in these communities. The influence, perception, the support, the infrastructure, the pedagogical issues, all these are a bearing in terms of the success of the implementation of ECE in the communities. And essentially that failure to address that led to actually poorly supported ECE systems. And the consequences were that we had issues of lack of community ownership of these ECE centers and the learning process itself, including all what is around ECE education. We had issues of vandalisms and thefts of these infrastructure that were established in our communities, or some of the perceptions and failure to appreciate these, the ECE by the community themselves. Another issue that, of course, emerged from our field, among others, but specifically on this parental and community involvement, was the issue of absence of our learner. When you see LSEND there, it is referring to learners with special education needs and development. So in other words, learners that were differently abled. And then also we had issues that emerged from the field that were touching on gender parity issues. Gender parity issues being used to refer to issues of mostly these centers being managed by female teachers, and there was quite a very loud communication of absence of our male teachers in these centers. Mostly female teachers were the ones that were there. But when it came on the part of learners, parity issues, and girls, I think there was a balance in that. So around this, we had this information, and we went on to look at what is that we can do now to try and address some of these issues that are bordering on perception and the like, that can help us in terms of sustainability issues. Maybe the next slide. So what we did was to write on these findings that I've just spoken to. We realized that there was need to strengthen, to create more of community partnerships by way of creating what we're calling parent community school committees. Parent community schools committees, because we were using the model of home, school, and community, the three being involved and working together. So the parents, the communities, the school committees were created as a way of trying to sensitize the community, also to channel information through these to help in the coordination. We also tried to link these committees to the district ministerial officials or structures to help us in capacity strengthening. We realized that there were a number of interventions from the ministry that were not reaching the actual communities, and yet we had learners that needed to benefit from these ministry-initiated interventions. So we had that as well, linking the committees, the district officials, to ensure that whatever capacity initiatives came forth, they were also communicated and engaged. Orientation of parents and communities on the importance of ECE. The value of it, so emphasis now. And that is within our research, we realized there were some parents that actually we had to use some of those as part of the key players to be involved and support ECE. In terms of community, we had some communities that existed, and therefore we also involved them in terms of those that already had existing structures. Benefits, we had strengthened the, of course, community ownership was enhanced. Then participation also was increased in the community as a result of those interventions. Coordination was improved. Policy, which will be our last slide, colleagues. Out of this, the whole process involved the Ministry of Education, the policy implementers, right from the word go. And therefore, the model of trying to strengthen the home school and the community in trying to develop and implement ECE, both on the structure-wise and everything around, was bought into. And right now, as I speak, we have the ministry scaling up the model of trying to strengthen the community involvement, parents around ECE. We also contributed through this research to the curriculum review. Our country just implemented the new curriculum this year, and part of the submission to that review of the curriculum came from our research on this, especially to do with play-based learning and teacher training. We also revised the diploma program at the University of Zambia to strengthen aspects of play-based learning. And we are giving students recruited and trained both at the diploma level and also at master's level. Thank you. We can engage more, of course, in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. I know it's so hard to sum up such rich work in such a short amount of time, but I think you did a great job of kind of, I think, just giving us some of those top line key aspects in terms of identifying some of those issues as it relates to community engagement in the school readiness initiative, and then really kind of the tangible steps that you took to really strengthen those links at the community level, and then really linking that to subnational engagement with the government, and then furthermore linking this research to larger policy dialogue. And I hope we can delve into that, how that was achieved, perhaps in the Q&A, because I think that was a big success of this project. And so now I'd love to transition over to Natasha, who will give us a very valuable perspective as a teacher being engaged in this project and her work identifying and speaking maybe to some of the challenges, but also some of the successes that she had in supporting this family community engagement initiative as part of this project. So Natasha, over to you.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon. I'm Natasha. I'm an ECE teacher from Kalea West, that is within Zambia. I'm a beneficiary from this project as I have attained a master's. Thank you very much for early childhood education. So, okay, before the program came on board, we had quite a lot of challenges when it came to understanding play-based learning. There was a lot of confusion, but at least, yes, the impact of the project now we have clear understanding through the learning that has taken place for both diploma as well as master's students. This impact can be seen in the communities. So we also had challenges bridging the home to the school in terms of school readiness. Parents were not for the idea of bringing their children to early childhood centers. They would rather just take them directly to grade 1. But after a lot of teaching, as the previous presenter talked about, educating community members on the importance of ECE, we have quite a lot of learners now readily enrolling into ECE centers to benefit them. And then we also have the community members also contributing as well as getting involved in developing ECE centers. That was a challenge previously because they didn't see the need for having ECE centers that were speaking to play-based learning. If a learner comes to school, they would only expect a learner to be seated in class writing and then later on knocking off. But thanks to the project, we have better learning infrastructures, which have led to increased access to quality education all across Zambia. So the project has really helped us. The project has really helped us enhance play-based learning at different levels. And as a beneficiary, both as part of the program and as well as part of the community, I have really seen the impact of promoting play-based learning, because this has really helped us understand the needs of the learners, both those with special needs and those without special needs, to say, in order for them to learn effectively, they have to be allowed to be children. That is, allowing them to learn and allowing them to play in whichever way they feel comfortable. So yes, the project has really helped because it has helped parents see the need for developing infrastructure, developing play packs, even using local materials. Yes, parents have also come on board because they're always asking to say, what's the next project now that we've worked on this particular part of the playground, now that we've helped out cleaning the outside areas or cleaning the inside of the classroom. They're always ready to help and make sure that the school or the center is in good condition. I have participated in quite a few trainings for both parents and teachers, and I have really seen their faces light up when they see the benefits of play. Yes, so I think that is all for me. Thank you so much, Joa.
Thank you, Natasha. We are going to transition to a Q&A, but I'd actually love to just take advantage to delve a little bit deeper into what you were saying, because I think it's so important. You were kind of saying that a challenge was kind of, I guess, making parents and caretakers understand the importance of education, not only in terms of enrolling children at school, but also creating a better environment at home. Can you just tell us, I mean, what were some of the challenges? Like, how did you do that? What did those conversations look like? Was that you going door to door? Was that speaking with parents? Like, how did you achieve that? What were some of the lessons learned in terms of the most effective approaches that you would recommend to others on this webinar that you thought was kind of the best strategies as an EC teacher to reach those communities and help them understand?
Thank you so much. So for starters, I had to use a different approach in my classroom as well as outside the classroom. It had to be more fun-based, more play-based. I had to improve on the play park area to just showcase to them, to say, this is what we're doing here. And then from there, following the same learners in the classrooms, I would do house visits to parents, especially those that didn't really seem interested. And then after they got on board, they would actually encourage other parents to come along as well and attend to meetings talking about play-based learning. And then from there, they would actually appreciate to say, actually, I've seen my child doing this, but I didn't realize that this is part of learning. So from the home visits, we also ended up having regular meetings with parents by the school center, which incorporated the building project. That's where the building project actually came in from. When more parents started attending the meetings, we were able to discuss ways of improving the school center and improving the play area, as well as making the environment, the home environment, more conducive to play-based learning.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Natasha. That's really, really helpful. I think some great tangible examples of what that approach looked like. And maybe just a follow-up, and then I'm going to perhaps segue to a question for Mr. Robinson. But were you able to, in your work, address, I mean, there's been a lot of questions coming up in the chat around this issue around inclusion and children with special needs. Is that something that you were able to address through interventions at the community level and help advocate for the integration of children that are typically and all too often excluded from these services?
Yes, thank you. Actually, yes, we have actually been having a movement for including learners with special needs, both physically as well as mentally, because we have identified to say it is a cross-cutting issue that is increasing rapidly in Zambia. So through the project, we had a case where one child who is in a wheelchair was allowed to come and participate in most of the activities, and would make sure that if the child is unable or uncomfortable during certain activities, we would improvise and make more friendly activities for him, just to make sure that he feels part and parcel of the whole group. We would use a lot of ball games when we're outside, just to make sure that he's also able to participate. We've also had a few encounters with learners with autism as well. Those were actually encouraged. We were understanding in order to notice how comfortable they are around noisy places, or whether they're the verbal ones or the non-verbal ones. So by doing that, we have actually incorporated the learners with special needs, the ones that appear to be slow learners. We have actually identified different ways of incorporating the learning system to them. So they have different materials that they use, which are more all hands-on activities. Like there's the drawing, there's the painting, there's also sand play as well. This has really helped us like encourage all learners from all walks of life to just feel at home when they come in the classroom. And of course, there's the dancing and the singing. That is their favorite part.
Natasha, thank you so much. I'm just looking at the comments, and there was a great comment that came. There's so many, it's hard to keep track, but they were just saying teachers are change makers. And I think what we're hearing from you is a testament of absolutely that. So thank you so much for sharing these reflections with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and congratulations on your master's degree. I know that you'll put it to outstanding use. With that, I want to transition maybe to a question to you, Mr. Robinson. I think there was one key piece of the story that I think was so important, is that this this project on accelerated school readiness was picked up by the ministry and now is starting to be taken to scale. It would be great to hear from you kind of what were the critical entry points in leveraging the research and the findings that came from this KIX research to help inform that process and ultimately help the government get that buy-in from the government to really try to take this community-based approach to scale. What were some of those critical factors that you see and some entry points that you would highlight to others on participating in today's webinar to keep an eye on, as in terms of where you really want to focus your time and energy when you have that evidence and data in hand that's coming and emerging from research such as yours?
Thank you, moderator. So, see, one of the issues that I would consider to be a strength on the project is that at the end of the day, we knew that government would be ultimately the main policymakers when it came to sustainability of the research. So we had them engaged right from the beginning. All the field visits, the research that we are doing, we actually could invite specialists from special education, especially from the Ministry of Education in charge of learners with special needs, to be on board in those research field visits that we are doing, to see for themselves the status of what was happening in these community schools, the dire absence of learners with disabilities, and with a view that that would actually involve them when it came to different levels of policy making, teacher recruitment, capacity building. They need to ensure that these communities are also taken care of, send teachers of such services down to such a level. They realized just how much we were leaving out communities. People tended to hide children in their homes instead of sending them to the centers, probably because they wouldn't see the need of help that they would get. So with them, I think on board, that was helpful. But also the other aspect that we did, we held a national symposium. Where we brought together all cooperating partners, the ministry itself, the Directorate of Early Childhood Education was at the center of our national symposium. The ministry, the parliamentarians, we brought also the members of parliament. There's a committee on education. We invited such a committee because that's an entry point when it came to policy implementation. They were on board. So when we were sharing these findings, it was very easy for them to tap into the findings and also appreciating just how important the community, caregivers, and parents were when it came to sustaining the implementation of early childhood education. Because some areas actually government is very difficult to reach. So once you bring these people on board, it becomes easy actually to manage those areas. That's another issue. We did also make publications. We had about 5 publications, research publications that we did out of this research. Probably they could be in our chat. We created 4 policy briefs out of those research that we did. And those 4 policy briefs, we shared them during the national symposium, highlighting the key areas, focusing on infrastructure, focusing on the need to involve parents and communities. In fact, one of the strengths so we had to leverage on the already of the traditional leaders, and we emphasize that point. Even when it came to creating those parent community, school community committees, traditional leaders were able to be at the center of mobilizing, and they got into that. The idea of those security, vandalism, to the infrastructure was also enhanced because when we talk to these parents, one thing that we noticed, the colleagues, is that in the field, you would find that people would make efforts at the community center. The following day, you find things have been vandalized, even stolen. That was an issue of failure to appreciate the role of parents in sustaining these centers. At the end of the day, because of this community mobilization, sensitization, that changed. Right now, when you visit some of these centers supported by the project, with the visitation of the ministry officials, we are even having now government schools invite in those centers where we're having the project running, and just to appreciate. So surprisingly, actually, we found schools that are in existence. And it was because of the failure to approve, trying to support these initiatives. I don't know if I'm trying to respond.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mr. Robinson. Unfortunately, there were some connection issues. We lost a few probably very valuable pieces, but I think we got the overall response. Thank you so much. I think you provided such a detailed kind of step-by-step overview of how you were successfully able to leverage, I think, the findings and the research to inform policy dialogue and help take this program to scale. So congratulations on that achievement. If people want to learn more about this project, the link to the report is in the chat. So thank you both again for your rich contributions. Maybe just a few summary reflections from my side based off, I think, this panel and the contributions from Mr. Robinson and as well as Natasha. I think it just really speaks to the importance of ensuring that families and communities need to be at the center and not at the periphery of our national strategies when we're developing national strategies for ECE. I think too often those voices are not included when we get to the policy dialogue level. And ultimately, that creates sustainability and ownership issues. So how can we engage local stakeholders in this strategy development process, right? I think that that's something that we need to collectively think about. And I think that this project gives a tangible example of how that can be achieved. I think it's also important to keep in mind, and I think that this was highlighted, that if we want to really foster holistic child development and learning, this needs to happen not only through high quality access to early learning and early childhood education programs, but it needs to be complemented by a conducive home and learning environment. And so I think we really need to always keep in mind it's that two-pronged approach. We can't only focus on early learning centers, or we're missing 50% of the equation. And I think that this program, and I think what we heard from you, Natasha, just spoke to the importance of engaging with parents, helping them understand the value of learning, how it can be facilitated through play, how you don't have to be a formal teacher to help kids develop and learn. These are very simple messages, very tangible ways of achieving this, but how you ensure that messaging at the community level is critical. And it really depends on a well-trained and engaged ECE workforce. And I think Natasha is an outstanding example of that, right? Without investing in ECE teachers and giving them and equipping them with the tools that they need to play that role at the community level, to liaise with parents, with community leaders, to encourage children to attend preschool, but also then ensuring parents that understand the importance of creating that environment at home. That's essential. Yeah, so I really think that we need to be looking at driving school readiness and holistic development at all levels, right? So you have those partnerships at the global level, regional level, national level, subnational level, and ultimately, and perhaps most importantly, the local level. And this really requires engagement and coordination from a diverse group of stakeholders, EC specialists, advocates, governments, government representatives, I would say from across sectors, not just education, civil society, teachers, parents, caregivers, community members, and ultimately children themselves. Because one thing that maybe we haven't touched on, but it also is the peer-to-peer learning and the role that can play, both at home and within the formal setting. So again, thank you both for this rich discussion. Thank you to all our online participants for the great questions and comments. And with this, I'd love to transition now to hand over to Jill Popp, a Senior Research Specialist with the LEGO Foundation. And the LEGO Foundation has been such a key contributor to this work on KIX around play-based learning and school readiness, who will provide some closing remarks. So Jill, over to you.
Great, thanks. And thanks everyone today for the presentations and for your engagement. First, I want to say materials, as Sophie has put in the chat, are posted on the GPEKIX.org website, including the latest synthesis report on early learning. And then you can also find out more about the latest cohort of research projects on that website as well. Back in 2021, the Global Partnership for Education and the LEGO Foundation joined forces through a partnership that included a collaboration within the KIX initiative. Early on, we recognized a shared vision, ensuring quality education for all children. At the heart of this vision was a deep focus on quality, whether by advancing equity, inclusion, and learning outcomes, or by promoting innovative play-based pedagogies that support children's development and learning. This collaboration was a first of its kind for us, and the practical learnings that have been shared over the two webinars really demonstrate the importance of quality ECD uptake and sustainability. We've seen that the successful uptake and long-term sustainability of initiatives, including play-based pedagogies, are deeply rooted in collaborative stakeholder engagement. When governments, educators, parents, and communities work together, they foster a shared sense of ownership and ensure that these initiatives and programs are relevant and integrated into national education systems. From adapting curricula to local contexts, as we've seen, to developing user-friendly resources and leveraging technology for broader access, these collective efforts demonstrate how inclusive, context-driven strategies can drive meaningful and lasting change. My wish for the future is that play-based learning, of course, continues to thrive through strong, inclusive partnerships so that every child, regardless of where they are, can benefit from joyful, relevant, and sustainable learning experiences that are rooted in local realities and supported by their communities. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to the next webinar. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.